Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I am your host, Dr. Heidi Horsley, and I'm here today with my co-host, Jason Wendroff-Rawnicki. Hi, Jason.
Hi, Heidi. Thank you so much for having me on this side of the seats.
Well, you have done this show and been a guest many, many times. And, you called me up and said, I've got this great book. Yep. I'm part of it. It's coming out. I've got some amazing people that have written it and been part of this book. And can we get them on? And I said, yes. Come on in and co-host it with me.
Yeah, and it's so great to have that part of my life combined with like our connection too. So
absolutely. So we are going to be talking about The Faces of Grief today.
Yes.
Which is the book that you are in, and I'm excited for you to talk about that and to meet our other guests today. Before we do that, though, I do want to introduce you a little bit. So sure. A lot of people know you, but I want to give them more information about you. We met many years ago. I met your parents before I met you.
That is true.
Love them. Arnie and Varda, give them a shout out. They're wonderful people. And we met at a Compassionate Friends conference. And then several years later, I met you. So, and now you're very involved in Compassionate Friends.
Yes, yeah, very involved.
So Jason is a somatic grief therapist with a master's degree in psychology from Columbia University. You present workshops for the Compassionate Friends conferences.
Yep.
You just gave a phenomenal keynote at our national conference.
Oh my God, it was so much fun to be able to do that.
It was wonderful. So I think we can view it online too.
Yeah, you can, through my website, you can download, I had someone record it, and you can, through my website, you can get a copy of it.
I would suggest that because you gave a lot of great tips and tools on how to heal physically, emotionally, and psychologically.
Yeah, thank you.
So it is wonderful. And your sister Lauren died in a car accident at 24 years old. Mm-hmm. You started SIBS Online, a weekly peer support group for bereaved siblings, and you are featured in the book Faces of Grief.
Yeah, and that's coming out in December of 2024, so it's coming up really soon. Pretty excited about it.
Wonderful, I love this. And the book has got different chapters from different people about different losses?
Yeah, so there's 30 different authors telling their story of grief and loss, but it's not all just death loss. There's also a couple of non-death related losses in there as well.
I love it, because loss comes in many forms.
In many forms, yes.
And some people that have had death have also had divorces, moving, job loss, other losses.
Incarceration is one included. Mental health issues is another one. So there's a lot of great stories. There'll be a story that everyone can connect to.
I love it. Okay, Jason. So we are going to introduce the guests who are in this book. Yes. Some of them are here today.
Yep.
And we will start with Bill Correll, who's right next to you.
Hi there.
Hi, Bill. Bill is a certified life and business coach. He has lost over 25 loved ones since the beginning of COVID, including a best friend that you had for 43 years,
Yes.
and your beloved father.
My dad, yes.
Bill has a podcast called Lighting the Candle, A World That Works, and he is featured in the book Faces of Grief.
Yes, I am.
Welcome, Bill. And next to you, I know, is one of your partners in crime here, because you do a lot together. You collaborate together, right? Mm-hmm. And you do a podcast together. Mm-hmm. And is it the podcast that I just mentioned?
Yes, it is.
Very good. So that is called Lighting the Candle, A World That Works.
Correct. Yeah.
I love that you two are doing this
I couldn't
together.
do it without her.
And I couldn't do that without him.
I love it. Love it. Love that you're doing this together. So Jan Jeremias. Yes. She is a compassionate health coach and best-selling author of the book Spoil Your Pet, a practical guide to using essential oils in dogs and cats. Love that, because I love my dog. Jan has developed an integrative approach to vibrant health rooted in nutrition, movement, yoga, essential oils, and meditation, which I also love. And I know, Jason, you do a lot of that as well. And she also hosts another podcast called Pets, People, Life, and Longevity. Wonderful. And you are also featured, obviously, in the book Faces of Grief. Mm-hmm. Yes. So welcome to our show,
Thank
Jan.
you.
And next to Jan is Kate Mollison.
Hello, how are you?
Hello. Kate is a certified grief coach and the founder and CEO of On Tuesdays We Wear Black, which she started with her husband who died. Oh, you started after your husband died.
I did.
Your husband's name is Craig, and you started this after his death, and he died of medical negligence, leaving you as a young widow at 32 years old with 2 young children.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and you are also the host of the National Grief Awareness Professional Development Conference. Mm-hmm. and you are also featured in this book, Faces of Grief. So welcome, Kate.
Thank you.
And last but not least, Carin Mikos. Yes. Carin Mikos is a registered nurse, creator of the Quietus House, a concierge service designed to support folks at end of life and provide grief support. Carin hosts the podcast In the Gap and is featured also in the book Faces of Grief. So welcome, Carin.
Thank you very much.
Wow, what an amazing lineup, Jason.
Absolutely incredible group of people.
Yeah, so how would you like to start today? How are we going to start this show?
Let's start off by just, since it is 30 stories of grief, like without giving it all away, what is your story about? Like in just a couple of sentences.
Well, obviously, numerically, there are too many people for me to talk about, so I really spent most of my time talking about 4 or 5 people, during the last year or so. The most important thing was to kind of take the beginning where I was, how I used to behave about loss in the family under normal circumstances, maybe a year, 1 or 2 a year kind of a thing. And then all of a sudden it started coming faster, and then I wasn't even able to be the big, strong, consoling big brother that I'd always been, or uncle, or whatever. And to finally just wanting to find a hole in the ground and fall in and just curl up into a ball. Mm-hmm. So all of those things that happened, I had days that worked, days that didn't work, and then I had weeks that worked and weeks that didn't work. But the whole story came back down to the end punctuation of when I decided I really do have the rest of my life to live was when I lost my dad and I lost my best friend a month later. And he kept me sane through those two. My best friend kept me sane through all of it. My dad had dementia, so we watched him go away slowly over about 2 years. So the story is mostly concentrated around that, but I wanted to just let everybody know how I really found my way out of hell was to start asking other people how they were doing. What was COVID like for them? Starting to hear their stories. And then I got introduced to Kate Mollison. This was like crazy. This is like a whole new language. There's access here to something else. So that's kind of the answer to that question.
That's great. Yeah, and it's amazing how we've all connected in wanting to tell our stories, but not knowing how, and this being such a good platform to make that happen.
Yeah, my podcast producer actually introduced the two of us.
That's so fun.
I love it.
Yeah, Jen.
So mine wasn't on the loss, mine was really on the loss of myself in a lot of ways. Mine is about divorce and the traumatic experience of having somebody reject you and turn around to you one day and say, I don't love you anymore, and walking out the next day.
That's tough.
And totally losing myself in the process. Like I had no idea who I was. And so my chapter is about rebuilding myself. Mm-hmm. And in the book, a lot of us put down who was it in memory of? And I wrote that it was in memory of myself from the time I was born, 1962, to the time I got divorced, which is 2001. Mm-hmm. Because I'm a totally different person than I was then. And I guess that's the difference between the whole idea of divorce, which is, in most cases, or a romantic breakup, where usually it's somebody who wants it and somebody who doesn't. Mm-hmm. And for me, it was total rejection, kind of what that was like. And it was interesting because in the beginning, this was probably one of my first experiences of totally kind of laying it all out for people to see in a more public space. And how in the beginning all these people would come to me and want to talk to me about their divorce, and that was the last thing I wanted to talk about. I do not want to talk about that, but it just seemed that that's where I was going. So that's where the chapter's about.
Yeah, and I've heard people refer to their divorces as the death of a marriage.
Yeah, it was the death of a life, a marriage. All of a sudden you go from being a partner, an idea of how you thought life was going to be, and all of a sudden that's gone. Total loss of a family, like a half of a family, really. A lot of friends who all of a sudden, they're one person's friends, and then when you get divorced, all of a sudden you lose a huge network of people that are no longer there. And it's like you wake up one day and they're gone, and you're like, so you grieve so many different things. not only the person who, wasn't my choice, so I still, everything loved him. So that was really challenging. And also that whole idea of being unlovable, totally being rejected, and that belief, which I very much owned for many, many years.
Well, there's a lot of overlap between divorce and death, right? I'm seeing it here, and I appreciate you being so candid because there's so many people out there that can benefit from you going out there with your story and being honest.
I think the one difference for me, and people didn't get this, is for months and years afterwards, I dreamt he would come back. And when someone dies, they're gone.
Right, exactly.
I mean, maybe if you, depending on what you believe, they come back in some form. But there wasn't the possibility that I would I used to dream that I would come home from work one day and he'd be sitting on the steps. Wow. And so there was that whole idea of the finality of it all.
And Kate, what are your thoughts about all this?
It's so funny, as I'm listening to everyone talk, I find myself becoming emotional and being moved and just sitting with that feeling, because as I was writing, I initially started my chapter to really hone in on my experience. And there's so much information and support out there for widowhood, but there's nothing really predominant for young widows. I was 32. And it happened unexpectedly. And I was left with a 19-month-old and an 11-year-old and a house I didn't own and taxes I didn't know how to file and financial budget I didn't know how to run. And I was drowning. I was literally drowning in my own life. And it would have been so easy to just lay down in bed and pull the covers up over my head and pretend that none of it was happening. But I got to a point when I found this book project that I realized, as I'm building my business and as I'm trying to help people, I'm not being authentic in my own grief journey. I'm not being transparent in my own grief journey. And people need to hear how you can alchemize it, how you can take that pain and turn it into purpose, how you can find your way out of the dark. It feels impossible, but it does get better. And so for me, my chapter was all about the self-discovery, finding my own power, hearing his voice in my ear, finding that resilience and strength, knowing I was an example for my children, knowing that other women, other widows, other people in loss would need to know the gut-wrenching tragedy that I went through. My life is like a Hallmark movie. You can't make this stuff up.
Right.
It was so completely preventable, and it happened anyway. And the rug was just pulled out from underneath me. So people need that lifeline to go, it may not be exactly the same, but grief in that capacity is apples to oranges. They're both fruit and they live in the same produce department. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, So how do we take and have an authenticity and an integrity in our grief and show them love and respect enough to share their story and share our experiences and find community and camaraderie, and like Bill and Jam both said, and Carin, we all are connected, and Jason, it's so funny how the world has kind of brought us together in a way so much bigger than ourselves. And this book project just goes to further prove that there's work to be done in grief.
Carin?
Yeah, I mean, it is really emotional, and I think that sometimes that's what people are afraid of when you start to express your grief, is that you're overwhelmed with emotion. And in this book, I really learned some of those moments in my early career as a nurse. I mean, nurses, we have death all the time, and you don't really have that moment to stop and appreciate the life that was just before you. Because there's more coming, there's more patients, there's more demands. And I'll never forget that first patient as a nursing student I was blessed to have, where we had to have these really incredible, authentic conversations, and I will never forget. And he was dying, and he wasn't talking about dying. He was talking about what he still wanted to do. The conversations he wanted to have. He wanted to tell his wife one more time how much she meant to him and why he chose her. And to have the courage to be inside those conversations with those people, I found myself. And I found how to live my life. And that's what I wrote my chapter about, is those conversations.
Yeah, that's absolutely beautiful. And as far as my own chapter, it's about sibling loss. As a bereaved sibling, we don't always get the space to feel validated because we have to be strong for our parents, and we get all these messages that our grief is something that needs to be kind of pushed down in order to, and I can't be strong for my parents and then be also vulnerable at the same time. So it's about my journey there and through that and learning to get a better handle on my own grief and then how to help others.
I love that. In fact, Open to Hope wasn't initially something that I was part of. My mother, it started out as the radio show. Compassionate Friends asked us to do it. My mother did it alone, and she said to me after like 5 weeks, Heidi, what do you think of the show? And I said, the sibling voice is gone. It doesn't even exist. It's all about your loss. And she said, well, come in and co-host it with me. Yeah. So, you know what I find so moving about this show is how close everybody feels. Yeah. And after hearing all of you, I definitely want to get this book because I can feel the love and the connection that all of you have here.
Yeah, and I don't know if I've ever told you this, Heidi, but like you're part of my inspiration, seeing how you've allowed, you've told your sibling story and you've been like sort of the first wave of being vocal about your sibling loss, and it's just inspired me completely. So I don't know if I've ever told you that personally, but
thank you, and I love seeing what you're doing with it. I'm like, look at him!
You're
this is
a part
amazing.
Of that,
Passing the mantle. I love it. I love it. Thank you, Jason.
So that goes into kind of my next question about why is it important to tell your story, right? Why is it important to get your stories out there, especially like in this project? We could start with Carin.
Sure, thank you. This story is so important because we don't talk about it. As a culture, we don't talk about it. It's coming, everybody's gonna get there, and nobody even knows about it. So I feel, it's been my experience that having this conversation, providing information, even giving people an opportunity to write your own obituary, to write your own eulogy, to create your own legacy project, gives you control, gives you power, and it allows you to live your life until that last day. You're not worried about it. You're not concerned. It's not a surprise to your family that you want these plans. And it's just been my experience that through this conversation, the human in us learns how to live. And I think that really is part of this grief journey, is learning how to live again.
I think for me it's about normalizing the conversation, right? Like, death is inevitable. It is something we cannot avoid. And there is so much preparation and pomp and circumstance for how we come into this life. But there's practically none for how we exit. And I think telling my story and telling people about the tragedy that I went through and being vulnerable and transparent helps normalize loss, helps normalize trauma to a degree, but it creates access to programs like this, to foundations that do grief work, to support groups, to readings, to community, to friends. I'm beyond anything else. This book I'm so grateful for, but like you mentioned, the connection that we have, we were all very surface level professional peers when this all kind of came together. And I'm not exactly sure who came in at what point, but we all kind of landed at the same airport terminal and we're leaving a family. And so for people who read this book, they get to be part of that family.
Love it.
For me, I think it was really important to give a message of hope and empowerment to people. I think that most of society lives in a realm where they've actually donated all their power away, whether that be their personal health power, where they've donated and all of a sudden everybody else is responsible, or it's to their family as far as like roles they played and what they quote unquote were meant to do, or their plan kind of thing. And for me, I've never been that anyway. I've always been someone who's outside the box, very much so, in family and in a lot of what I did and how I lived. But this was an opportunity for me to express to people that it's okay to be authentic in who you are, and to celebrate that, and not worry so much about what everybody else is doing. And I mean, to me, the most important thing is like you're kind and you're a good person. And that was really what the values that I wanted to instill in people. Like, all the other stuff is just silly. It's pure silliness. And if you get beyond the layers, which is what we've all done here, you know, we've gotten down to much deeper connections and relationships with ourselves and each other than the majority of people, I think, out there. And it is possible, but it's work. Like, you've got to commit and you've got to make a choice that it's important. And that's really what I wanted to empower people.
So why is it important? Well, I say it's important, okay? And there's a real loss of power when your life has been altered without your permission in a way that can't be recovered ever. And I want people to know and to realize that for me, there were a series of decisions that I made that gave me a little bit more of my life back and my ability to say so. And I didn't write this book because I'm a professional in the field, far from it, but I didn't know anything about it, and I at least knew that. And so by surrounding myself with good friends and having the opportunity to tell my story, there were edits that were made to my story that I didn't care, because the message is for the people at the end. My last 3 sentences tell it all. I still have love to give, and I still want people to feel loved, and that's my job for the rest of my life.
I love that.
Yeah, and for me, it took me a very long time to start to deal with my grief, as I mentioned earlier, and I don't want any other bereaved sibling to feel like they have to suppress their own grief and not deal with their own grief just because they have to, be strong for their parents and all of those other messages that they're getting. So, yeah, and that's what kind of fuels my, desire to kind of continue the work that I'm doing.
Love that. I love how authentic everybody is and how real they are. I can feel that, and like I said, I think that's a real I think that's really important, because I think a lot of people out there, like you all are saying, they just think maybe they're alone and maybe they're the only ones feeling this way or going through these things. And hearing people be honest and candid is like, okay, wait a minute, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
There's other people out there that are struggling also.
Yeah. Well, if you're authentically sharing your memories and they start to leak out your eyes down your face, you're basically just showing people that you're like they are.
Well, I think also when you tell your story, you give permission for other people to tell theirs,
yes.
And I think that to keep it bottled up is...
I invite you to tell your story, I really do, because people want to know and keep talking past their ability to not listen, because sooner or later you get to the good stuff and you find out what's going on with them as well.
That's great. Yeah, and it's just, you act as a ripple effect, so that when you tell your story and everybody else tells theirs, you have no idea what kind of effect you're going to have on anybody else. So
my metaphor is lighting the candle.
There you go.
I love it.
Awesome. So tell everybody how they can get in connection with you, and about your work.
I'm easy to get in touch with. I'm on Facebook, Bill Correll, Correll. I also have a computer company, and you can contact me at my website, pds2k.com. And other than that, just keep talking to people. Somebody somewhere is going to know me, because I have like 5,000 Facebook friends and 2,500 to 3,000 people on LinkedIn, and I don't even want to get started with the folks that I think I know. So,
Jan?
Best way is actually through Facebook and LinkedIn.
Yep.
Are my predominant platforms. I do have a website, which is my name, janjeremias.com. And then you can also connect with me through the book, Spoil Your Pet. We have a website, so multiple ways, but I like social media the best.
So for those of you looking to get in touch with me, visit my website directly. On Tuesdays, we wear black, www.otwwb.com. There you can find my blog, my podcast, my resource guide. I do have a TED Talk coming up December 1st where I'll be speaking on grief and bereavement, so that'll be happening in Hartford, Connecticut. And LinkedIn is my preferred social media platform, so Kate Mollison on LinkedIn is how you can find me. Or if you find Bill, you can probably find me deep in his friends list somewhere.
Rising to the top of it.
That's
Probably
right.
if you connect to any one of us, you can connect to all of
Not
us.
a problem.
Exactly.
That's right. That's right.
After this, Heidi will be able to ring us all. So.
That's right.
Exactly. I love
Exactly.
So I'm at thequietushouse.com. I'm also, you can listen to my podcast In the Gap, wherever you get your podcasts. LinkedIn, Facebook, I'm everywhere. And I'm with these guys.
Yeah, yes you are.
And for me, it's www.somaticgrieftherapy.com. You could actually purchase the book through my website, and I have a whole bunch of other free things that you can download.
Well, thank you, Jason, and thanks to all of our guests, and thank you for getting all these amazing guests today. Faces of Grief, please go out and get this book. It sounds incredible, and I think it'll bring people hope after loss. And like you said, it covers a lot of different things, which is important. We'd like to close, as you know, Jason. Thank you for being my co-host today.
Thank you for having me. This is awesome.
Yeah, you were great. And we always like to say, if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own, and God bless.
God bless.
The loss of a loved one can leave you feeling depressed, angry, alone, lost. But you don't have to face this journey on your own. Open to Hope is a free community for anyone who has experienced loss. Find support. Find help. Find hope. Give grief a voice at Open to Hope. For more information, find us at opentohope.com.